we're live. So just want to turn the time over to Janet, and I think we have some new members and we have a new council liaison. So maybe we can start with that. I guess I can start with, if you want, Janet, we can start with that if that's what you want to do.
Well, let's introduce ourselves so everybody gets a feel for who we are. And Doug, well, okay, I'm Janet Dalgard. I'm the chair, and I've been with Friends Forever in a library aficionado for my life. And Doug, you go, and then the next person.
Okay, I'm Doug. I'm the library director here. Most of you know me. I've been around as director for a little over 6 years now. And welcome to our newest members, which are, I think, Jan is not with us at this moment. Who am I missing? I'm sorry, I'm not seeing everybody. Michael, right?
How about Martha? Let's introduce Martha next. We'll just go on the screen.
Perfect, Martha.
Hi, I'm Martha Swanson, a former member of the foundation board. I think I'm in my 3rd term of library advisory board, although we kind of missed a year. Welcome new members.
Okay, Emily.
Hey everybody, I'm Emily. I joined last year promptly before we stopped having meetings for COVID. So I haven't been to too many meetings, just a couple, but I'm happy to be back.
Glad you're with us. Okay, Sarah, go.
Hi there, Sarah Flathman, Youth Services Manager at the library. I'll pass it over to Rick.
Yeah, hi, Rick Peterson, Library Manager.
Okay, we've got Bill.
Hey, I'm Bill Monahan. I'm with the City Attorney's Office. I've been assisting the city off and on for several years. And I've been working with Doug on a couple other projects over the last couple of years.
Okay, Rebecca.
I hope I was muted when my kids were bothering me to get on the text time, but I'm Rebecca Cassidy. I forget how long I've been a member, but I love the library board. So welcome everybody.
Rory.
Hi everybody, I'm Rory. I'm the council liaison to the Library Advisory Board, and I'm glad to be here. I was elected in the 2020 general election, and I see my role as one of information liaison, kind of. If you ever have any questions or any needs that I can take to the council, I'm happy to, or answer any questions myself that I can, but I can't speak on behalf of the whole council, but I can do my best to provide information, and I'm a big fan of the library as well.
Welcome. Glad you could make it to join us. Now I guess it's just Stephanie Brown's iPad that needs to be identified.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Matt Brown, using my wife Stephanie's device, so didn't figure out how to change the name yet, but I'm a brand new member, really excited. Lived here for 15 years, raised our daughter here. We used the library probably every week for that time. We're all voracious library content consumers, and as for my day job, I basically sit at a computer. I'm a history buff at heart. I work for the Oregon State Archives, and I do technology projects for them to get information out to the public. So looking forward to working with this committee.
We're so glad you could join us. Welcome aboard. Maybe we'll get to see you in person soon. This will happen. So, okay, has everybody had a chance to go over the minutes, review, and approve them? Just thumbs up if you're good. Thumbs up. Okay. And okay, let's go on. The agenda review. Everybody happy with that? Anybody would like to add anything? Thumbs up if you're happy. Okay. Then we'll go straight into Doug. Please take it away.
Thanks, everybody. Welcome, Matt. Glad to have you aboard. Jan Boyd is our other newest member, and she's on the Library Foundation, and I don't see her on here. So she may be coming in a little bit, or well, if not this time, we'll hopefully catch her on next month. A little background on her. She, because I do know her, she has, she's over content media and new media for OPB. So she has a broadcasting background, a longtime broadcaster and news anchor, and she does that for Oregon Public Broadcasting. And she's a fairly new, I think, what would you say, Martha? She's a couple years here in West Linn, I think.
She joined the foundation right before. the
Right,
shutdown.
yeah. Right, so she's been a fairly new member of both the foundation, and she's also the newest, another new person on Library Advisory Board. So as you may recall, we've had Bill scheduled last month. We had ice and other things to deal with, but we were a few months ago, I think in January, we started on, well, it was even, I think before January, we started talking about the behavior policy, and the behavior policy was in part to kind of address a few issues relating to curbside pickup. We had some, not just one or maybe two individuals who, if their behavior had happened inside the library, they might have been asked to leave the library that had happened outside the library. So it brought into question some of our policies. And so we looked them over, and we had, of course, Bill look at them. And so now he's here to and talk to us before. I think he works on another committee with me, and we go back, like Bill said, a few years. So I think, I don't know if we've talked about this with this group yet. I know we have an arts and culture thing that he's worked on with us too for another committee I'm over, or liaison for. So I'll turn the time over to Bill, who's a great guy and can really help us, I believe.
Well, thanks, Doug. No, I haven't had a chance to talk with this committee about this project. It was the Arts and Culture Committee that we talked about their bylaws. So as I see this policy, I know that you've had this in place for a number of years. Our office actually was not involved in drafting this. I was a little curious when I first received the policy. I wanted to go back and look at the origin of it and what some of the discussion points were. But it turned out at the time, the project was worked on by the then in-house city attorney, who worked on some projects that were assigned to her. So unfortunately, I don't have the background on that. However, the policy that you adopted several years ago is a pretty solid policy. I've looked it over and made some comments in my notes on some issues that I think you probably want to discuss. I assume, though, that you have in front of you the draft that Doug provided to me that is a modified document that incorporates some new ideas. Is that correct, Doug?
I think it was sent to them, but I will pull it up and I can make it available to everybody on the screen. If you want to continue talking, I'll find it and I can do that.
Yeah, because that might be valuable since it has been a few months. People might have misplaced it. So some of the issues that I identified as I looked at the policy is obviously you want to have a process that clearly identifies to the users of the library what behavior is acceptable, and when they cross the line, what some of the issues are that might result. So I'm going to suggest some potential changes to give some clarity, and I'll probably give some suggestions on the need for training and perhaps posting of information so that we have more opportunity to enforce this. Also, I saw within the policy what appeared to me to be efforts to address some of the social issues that we're identifying, namely, many communities are dealing with issues related to homeless individuals. And we want to make sure that we don't create any barriers within this policy that give the impression that the city's trying to do anything that is going to discriminate against a homeless person. So as I go through some of my ideas, perhaps it'll relate to something related to that, that situation, that sensitivity. But if we want to start from the very beginning, the purpose statement, I think, is fine on the very first page. The first paragraph, though, speaks to fostering safety and protecting the rights of all patrons and library staff. I assume the intent there is library staff includes any volunteers that you might have. Doug, do you have a large contingent of volunteers? I assume you do.
Yeah, yes, we do. And though I don't think that when that was originally written, I think it was taken from the American Library Association's Bill of Rights, that volunteers hadn't been identified in the same way that they're identified now as far as the city liability for them. So it might, if you think legally, it might behoove us to put in the term volunteers. I think that would make sense.
Yeah, I think we should add "and volunteers" there. And there's another place that I'll identify a little bit later where we talk about individuals. And I think we ought to include volunteers, because one of the things that happened in the state legislature about a year and a half ago was we're now obligated to make sure that harassment, discrimination, that those things are not only issues for us to make sure that our employees are not engaged in those activities, but we also have an obligation to make sure volunteers are not involved in those activities, as well as elected officials and appointed officials. So we want to make it more all-encompassing, and at the same time create the protection for those individuals. So if we add "and volunteers" at the end of the first paragraph, I think that's fine. In the second paragraph, there's a reference in the next to last line about removal from the premises and expulsion from the library for a period of 1 day to 1 year, or arrest or prosecution. I think that's fine, but it's important that we make clear what the process is and who has that authority to make those determinations. There are some times that it's going to be important that if it's going to be an expulsion, and it's a person who's quite upset about the activity, we might want to make sure that we're in communication with and coordinate with the police department, so the police department can come and make that determination, rather than you place a library employee into that awkward situation of getting into a verbal or physical confrontation with an individual. And we also want to make sure that we're protecting civil rights. So I'd want to make sure that we make sure that anytime that there's any removal of someone from the premises, or the possibility of that, that there's a well-established process and policy to be followed, and there's training of the individuals involved, and ideally a well-coordinated relationship with the police department for those times that things escalate.
I can speak to that real quickly. So nobody's, the time that we've had to use this, when we've asked people to leave or they've left, it's always been with the police having already been called, and it's only administrative staff that has that we asked to do that with. So we don't ask staff to do that. We just ask them to alert of situations to let the management team, and then we take it from there. But there's never been a time where we've had to do it, but it's never been a time that the police have escorted them to off the premises, sometimes to be trespassed, sometimes because they had warrants or other things, but the police are involved in a good way, not in a harassing or inappropriate way.
Great, and it's always good if you have a library in-service day, perhaps once a year, that you involve a member of the police department to help you to go through the protocols to make sure everyone understands how things are going to be done. That also gives a great degree of comfort to your staff, I believe, to know that things have been reinforced and that there are those resources there to help them.
We do that, and it's part of our active shooter training that we go through every year with the police department. We also include that component in that training.
Okay. Then in terms of the rules, they all seem fine too. Oh, by the way, obviously, this is open for everyone. If you have questions hopefully Doug's going to be able to help me with answers on what the history of some of these are. I've just done the comparison between the existing rules and the new rules, but obviously anyone that wants to raise a question, please feel free to do so. In the rules, the third item down, intentional harassment of library staff, that's where I'd like to have volunteers added. Intentional harassment of library staff, volunteers, or other library users, that's obviously an example of a violation of our policies. So again, to protect the volunteers. But I didn't see any issues there. The item 3, possessing, selling, distributing, and consuming any alcoholic beverages except as allowed at a library approved event. That seems fine. I assume that there must be a policy that says if there's some kind of social event that the library is sponsoring, that you grant some sort of exemption for that activity in a way that complies with OLCC and those sort of things. But I didn't have an issue there. Using the library's property, the next page, you obviously have the right to create the policy on how property is going to be used, and that extends, of course, to your computers and Wi-Fi, anything else that the city has. Down in section 7, so this is where I first started to raise some concerns. Using audible devices without headphones or with headphones at a volume that disturbs others. I always get concerned when there's open-ended language about disturbing others. That's a personal thing, depending on where someone is in proximity to the person who has the headphones, etc. So we might want to come up with some parameters for that. Is it that a set of headphones can be heard by someone who's 3 feet away, 10 feet away, something of that nature? And since I'm not familiar with the layout of the library, it's very possible that in different locations in the library, there might be a different standard. So Doug, do you have any thoughts on that, or is that something that's been an issue?
It's not been, this has never come up in my time. There are children and sometimes adults that are probably more audible than headphones are on some of these. But we, by the nature of our building, we have the children's area has an open area that without a ceiling that comes and carries over into the main part of the library. So you can hear a lot of things from downstairs if the kids are enjoying the downstairs, the younger children. So I've never had this come up. There are some people that do wear headphones, obviously, but I've never had anybody complain. I guess I would also ask Rick and Sarah if that's been an issue at all in our time together there.
Yeah, we certainly run into it from time to time in our computer lab, especially where we'll have a patron listening to music or something on the computer, and usually younger folks, and they'll have it so loud that everyone in the computer lab can hear it, and a patron will come up and complain. And usually it's a very simple interaction where we just politely ask the patron to turn it down so others can't hear it. And yeah, it's never been challenged or anything like that.
One of the statements I've seen in the Los Angeles County standards, I asked Doug, by the way, for some examples of some of the better standards, and I found the Los Angeles County one that he referred me to as being pretty good. It uses language like inconsistent with normal use. So if a person is using their cell phone or some other noise-making device that is going to be inconsistent with normal use, maybe there's a way to stretch that language into it. But if it isn't a big deal at this time, maybe you want to leave it as you have it, disturbs others. And then as you go along in practice, you define what your activities are and what your experience is. And make some determination later on of adding specificity to it. The item number 9, using restrooms for bathing, shaving, washing, etc. I think that's good to have that language, but that's one that Los Angeles specifically had inconsistent with normal use. And I think that, again, was to avoid the stigma of drawing attention to activities of homeless individuals. We again don't want to be the organization that creates some standards that ACLU or some other advocacy group feels that the city is creating some language that is adverse to the needs of homeless individuals. Now, this policy apparently is already in the existing city policies. I would recommend that we change that to saying using restrooms inconsistent with normal use of restrooms in a public facility.
Can you say that one more time so I can write that down?
Yeah, inconsistent with normal use of restrooms in a public facility. Now, obviously, adding those last few words, in a public facility, raises the opening that, well, you know, maybe in some communities, those public facilities are used consistently by individuals for these activities of washing hair, doing laundry, etc. But if you haven't had that circumstance as one that's been a problem, I would recommend the language that I just suggested. Now, item number 10 is interesting because you have language that says smoking, chewing, or other methods of using tobacco in library facilities. The state has statute that is designed to promote clean air. So as a result, smoking, vaping, those sorts of activities are not allowed. Chewing and other use of tobacco that's not creating smoke or aroma is not included within the prohibitions. And in fact, I remember years ago being involved with a city that when that city attempted to create a personnel policy that was addressing state law to limit the use of tobacco products, the city attempted to put in no use of snuff, no use of chewing tobacco, and it became a contentious issue in a collective bargaining agreement. So what I'd ask here is that we make sure that we look at the city's personnel policies to make sure that if there is going to be language in the library's policies that apply, that we don't inadvertently trap some of our employees who come into the library and might be partaking of that type of tobacco product, if in fact that tobacco product is not banned as a personnel policy. I don't know the city's personnel policy in this regard, but it raised an issue for me. I want to make sure we don't have an inconsistency. So item number 12 talked about personal belongings and backpacks. And I know backpacks become controversial for a number of reasons, but here, the reason for the backpack issue seems to be, is it all-inclusive, bringing in person? How does this read, Doug? Bringing in personal belongings, backpacks, garbage, articles with an offensive odor, or articles which alone or in the aggregate are placed against buildings, etc. It seems to be saying that backpacks are prohibited in the library. Is that the case?
No, that is not the case. And I think that I see how somebody could read it that way. I haven't even looked at that. I think when this was established, I think again, this was probably taken from some other library advisor, library policies, behavior policies, and probably was just brought in there. And I think, you know, it is kind of, it sounds like to me, I mean, I was on the library advisory board then, and I don't remember, maybe Janet or Tom who were there as well can refresh the memory, but I think it probably was for people just bringing in, you know, things that may not necessarily need to conduct their activities in the library. It probably was, you know, designed towards certain individuals who might use the library, and that of course will not be our intention now.
Yeah, and it's possible that was back in the day that we're all more concerned about security, and not that we're not concerned about security today, but there was a heightened interest, and as a result, we were placing a lot of restrictions on the ability of someone to bring something in that could be a dangerous item. But I think we need to be careful on how we define what is appropriate and not, because it's going to be important that we be uniform in how we treat individuals. Because if someone brings in let's say a large backpack that seems to be carrying their clothing that is the only clothing that they have, and for some reason we decide that that's the backpack that we're not going to allow in, yet we've just allowed 5 high school students in with their normal backpack carrying their books, we're going to have a potential problem.
Yeah, I think the intent, probably now that I read it again, was that if you had those things and they had a odor about them, so, but it could easily be seen as not allowing backpacks in. But I think the intent, again, Tom, Janet, if you remember, I think the intent was it was a smell oriented rather than anything else.
So we probably need to rewrite this so that it's clear that that's the activity, that's the circumstance that we're concerned about. So maybe we start out with articles with an offensive odor, including but not limited to, and then we list backpacks, etc. Because it looks to me the way that it's written that it's that they're not connected.
No, it's just a smell.
Yeah. So that was the intent.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Would there be a way, because these issues seem to come up repeatedly as we go down the numbers, would there be a way in the broader introductory paragraph to itemize these things that we're concerned about so that we're not sort of repeating with a fresh definition for a little different use?
So you're suggesting it could be edited to, yeah, I think it could be.
Yeah, and dress it up with terms of public safety and those kinds of things up in that, up at the beginning of that. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, I think that might work as well.
So maybe they could be headings as opposed to just a list of statements. The headings could identify what the issue is that we're trying to address.
I can work on that and then share it with you, Bill, before our next time we would meet and see if it works.
Okay. I'm just writing a note to myself. Okay. So item number 14 talks about using wheeled devices in the library facilities or on library grounds, except in designated areas, including skateboards, roller skates, bicycles, scooters, and shopping carts. So the shopping carts is the one that got my attention. Does the city have an existing ordinance, Doug, that addresses riding skateboards and bicycles and skates along city, on city properties, around city buildings, or is this the only place that it exists? I didn't get a chance to take.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the answer to that. I can tell you that it's something we don't enforce. I see skateboarders every day in our parking lot now. The kids are getting back to school, so but I'm not quite sure, and I can check on that. I think the reason that came into play was more from a safety issue, especially when we just had a singular parking lot, and there was a lot of issues of cars, if you've been up in that lot, backing into each other and not being able to see people. So and there's a bike or a walking path that enters right into that parking lot. And so when people ride their bikes or they walk or they're on skateboards or other wheeled devices, it's really hard for cars to see them. And I think it was more, and Tom and Janet, you can, if you remember different than me, please tell me. It was more preventive of trying to stop people from getting in an accident rather than, or somebody getting hit, a pedestrian or somebody on a wheeled vehicle, than it was, against skateboarders and I think they just, I don't know why they put in shopping carts, except for some people do have in the past, aren't necessarily, let's say, using it to cart their personal belongings around. But I've noticed in the past, sometimes folks will take a cart over from Market of Choice and walk it to the library to pick up their things too, and then walk it back. So I think it's probably in relationship in part to its proximity to a supermarket that has, or to a market that does have shopping carts.
Right.
What if we change it to grocery cart instead of shopping cart? Because the shopping cart, little old lady can just carry that in, and that would be technically a shopping cart, whereas the grocery cart's a different item.
Well, I think we want to be careful not to say that using one in library facilities, if that means on the grounds. I'm concerned about having that language in a policy that prohibits somebody who might have all their belongings in a shopping cart to bring it onto library grounds and leave it outside in an inconspicuous place that doesn't prohibit access of other individuals to come to the building. Why isn't that acceptable? Because I think we don't want to be into the enforcement business where we're saying, because you brought a shopping cart with your personal belongings onto the library, you're in violation of policies. I think that would be under the law a problem. So I'm suggesting that we have limitations on bringing a shopping cart into the building. That would be an inappropriate thing. But to create a limitation saying you can't even bring it onto the property, I think is problematic.
And I think, and now I will look at again, I'll identify what the city language is around some of these things like bicycles and skateboards and other wheeled devices on city property, and see if there is rules on that. Like I said, I think we're more concerned. I'm not really concerned about people on skateboards or bikes or even people pushing carts. It's more the safety of them, and maybe asking them to at least walk them on the sidewalk or be on the sidewalk and walking them. And I don't know if we can even do that, but like I said, it's a daily activity here. Sure. And no one's ever enforced it ever in my time, at least.
Well, and then my overall comment is, once we do come up with some modified language, we should run it by the city's insurance carrier, CIS, to make sure that the language that we have is not considered by them to be a problem, because they're monitoring the case law and the liability issues that come with use of public facilities and the problems that arise. You're probably aware that in the last couple of years, there have been some federal cases related to homelessness, and it's becoming, of course, a very sensitive topic, and it's becoming very difficult for local governments to create limitations. So we want to make sure that we're current with what CIS advises.
I think maybe there's ways to couch 2 or 3 of these different points that have been brought up, wrap them around safety as the main issue, as opposed to any other perceived issue. And I also think that separate from City Hall, which is really part of a large public open area, and I don't know what you could designate is their property. I suppose you get past the sidewalk and the front door and it's really public property and not the city's. But in our case, you know, every square foot of what we have is city.
Right, and it was all designed for library purposes, and as it was designed, as Doug said, with the parking lots placed as they were, then our societal uses of property and, you know, the use of skateboards and other things for transportation as well as recreation, that, you know, perhaps some of those regulations were written to make sure there weren't conflicts between recreational use and normal everyday use. And, you know, perhaps there's ways to put some signage, some posting that says when somebody is using a one of these means of transportation in a reasonable way, in a reasonable location, that's acceptable. But there are places within the library property where it's not. It creates either a hazard for the individual or it's a hazard for other users. So jumping on to enforcement, because I don't want to, several of these other comments that I had are all questions about timing. There's things like leaving a child unsupervised or unattended. Well, how long? Is that for 2 minutes or is that for a half an hour? Leaving personal belongings unattended, for how long? So we might want to try to put some parameters into that. What's a reasonable expectation of when someone has left an unattended child or an unattended article in the library that creates what? Is it a public safety issue for others within the library, or for the person who is left unattended, or is it a possibility of theft? We might want to add some language there. On the last item on enforcement, so the enforcement policies raised to me questions about whether or not we're placing a higher burden on the city to address behavior that occurs that requires some enforcement. Are we creating a higher burden for ourselves? And I wonder whether we've fully thought out how we would enforce. For instance, in the second paragraph, it says individuals who repeatedly violate the behavior rules may be progressively excluded from using library services, with a range going from suspension of privileges for 1 week to a permanent loss of all library privileges. So, well, we went from 0 to 1 week. Is 1 week what we want to have as the minimum of a penalty, or would just expulsion and ask, you know, come back tomorrow when you've cooled off, or something else has taken place, as opposed to a week? Because a week could be a very long period of time for somebody who has the need for library facilities for whatever their needs might be. So I think we might have created a higher standard here. And I think it's important to make sure that it's clear how such expulsion is going to take place. If it is always going to be, does the library director make that determination, or Is it someone else who is assigned to a particular section of the library, or any library employee? So I think there's a need for a little more specificity there.
All right, I can work on that. I can speak from, last 6 years. There's never been an experience where someone went out for a week. It's always, if it's brought to my attention and I believe it's severe enough, they're trespassed. So they're out at least a year. And so everything that falls below that is just a talking to. And a couple of times we've had some people that have had mental health issues. The police have come and talked to them. We didn't trespass them. We just got them the assistance and help that they needed, and they've been back. And then sometimes if it creates, putting people in jeopardy, then we, of course, escalate it. I think the extent we've had unfortunately, we've had level 3 sexual predators in here, and they're excluded forever. So those are most extreme cases, and we don't have them. We've only had one in that case in my 6 years that I know of. Let's hope that was only one. And but that's something we're very aware of and are preventative about as much as possible. So so just using it as a practical policy, it's only gone to probably the most extreme, and it's not been that many times, but it's been more than 5 or 6 in 6 years. But there hasn't, I've never, and it would always be the library directors, in this case it's me's decision to make any kind of decision based upon some form of penalty or some form of exclusion or some taking away someone's rights. That's always been mine, and it's usually in consultation with the police because it usually has involved somebody to that requires probably some attention for various issues with them as well.
That makes me feel more comfortable. That addresses my concerns in sections the 3rd and 4th paragraph, because in the 3rd paragraph, it says any person so excluded, this was after some violations, any person so excluded shall lose all library privileges for a period of up to 1 year. Then in the 4th paragraph, where it's talking about individuals who repeatedly violate the rules may face a longer exclusion. The language that Los Angeles County used that I liked was, instead of stating a period of 1 year or whatever, it says for a period determined, in their case, by the county library director. And obviously the practice that we have, the appropriate practice is it's as determined by the library director. And then Doug would be able to utilize whatever elements of due process he feels are necessary should somebody raise a complaint that they want to have an opportunity to state their case. Perhaps he holds a mini hearing, writes some findings, gives them something that they're able at least to leave with that tells them exactly what they did, rather than have them think that they're discriminated against because of whatever they feel that they're being addressed with.
In one case, that my requirement for somebody to return when they ask was that they sit down with myself and the police chief to talk about what had happened before and how that was going to change. And as soon as they heard that it was going to be the police chief and not somebody else, and it wasn't a particular police chief, it was the position rather than the person, they decided they didn't want to come back. So that was the requirement that I made of them, and they decided not to go forward with that.
Great. Well, I think you've got a good practice in here. I think it's important that we tweak some of this language so that it is specific to what we actually do, and that those good practices be identified. So this has been in place for almost 8 years. Sounds like you haven't had a large number of issues. I hope that some of the things that I've identified, at least drawing into question, are ones that help us to make it a little bit more cleaner and easy to administer. Other than that, I didn't have any major concerns, Doug.
Thanks. There was one thing we wanted to take out that I don't know if you saw. That was the one about number 15, which was lying down or sleeping in the library. And we've had in the past, we have a set of individuals that come when we're open from a adult group home, and most of them are, they're older adults, and sometimes we all know them. They come every Wednesday and they stay all day and they're fine. We never had an issue, but some of them fall asleep, and that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, I've never woken them up. They're not bothering anybody and they're fine. And so I wanted to address that because I don't enforce that rule, even though it's on the books. And I don't really believe that falling asleep in a chair should be something, unless you're snoring so loud, the headphone rule comes into play.
Right.
But I think that we wanted to change that to, delete sleeping and add, or using the library space to the detriment of others. And maybe that's too broad as well. That was one of the recommendations from a past library advisory board member who's not on this. They were last year's, they're not on this year. So, but I do think it was important. And then also there was an addition to the definition of harassment, using the legal definition of harassment in language here as well.
Yeah, I think being consistent with the legal definition of harassment as it applies in other city policies is important. I think the other comment you're making about sleeping, maybe what we want to do is define what the impacts are, what the environmental results are, rather than prohibit the activity. We prohibit what the impact is on the use of the library by other patrons.
It sounds good. I can work on those things too. So I guess the question while you're still here is, Bill, are there other questions from library advisory board members that Bill hasn't addressed? And do you feel comfortable as a board in having myself and Rick and Sarah work on these changes and recommendations that have been made by our city attorney, and then bringing them back to you, to the city attorney's office and to you in the future, probably next month, to relook them over and kind of see if it's something that you would want to vote on for a policy?
Seems to make sense.
I feel comfortable with that.
I agree. We can all just do a little thumbs up if we're all happy. Just a little, okay, good. Thanks, guys.
So that's what we'll go forward. So Bill, I'll work on this with my team and then get back to you. And then once maybe you and I can, if there's some things that need to be tweaked, we can do those and then present it to them at an upcoming library advisory board meeting.
That sounds great. Be happy to continue to work with you on this, Doug.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So you done with me, Doug?
Just for tonight, not done with you for a long time.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, there's everybody.
Oh, hi, Tom. Okay, so we get back to Doug.
So I wanted to share with you, I think, something that we didn't talk about before, but it's kind of exciting. One of the things that we were able to acquire with some of our CARES Act funding, as some of you know, we've been working with virtual programming throughout this last year. It's almost been a year now since we've not been open, and we'll talk about being reopened because we opened on Monday for some things, so that's exciting. That'll come up. But in working with the school district and other organizations in our city, we've always wanted to, and I think we've talked about having some cooking programs. We've had some adult cooking programs before with various folks that offer those kind of things in our area. We had a tortilla making class, and as you know, if any of you have seen recently, we've had some cookbook authors, and we've also have a spice club, and we have some other things around the area of food and that we've been working on. Well, with some of the funding that we were able to acquire through a CARES Act to the city, we were able to buy a mobile kitchen, which just came this week, didn't it, Sarah? And maybe, Sarah, you want to talk a little bit about that? Put you on the spot there.
Sure thing. Yeah. So our librarians are so creative, always trying different ideas when it comes to virtual programming, which is what we think we'll be in for at least a little while here. So we love the idea of a mobile kitchen to utilize to do continue on with our kitchen chemistry series. Our children's librarian Kimberly has done some great things where she kind of breaks down recipes and the science that happens when it comes to cooking. Also have ideas of collaborating with different city departments and maybe having a community kitchen program where different staff members, originally the idea was working with the police department, but we thought it'd be great to kind of widen it up and have folks contribute their favorite recipes. Cooking just seems to be something that's really struck a chord in the community and really brings people together. So certainly as we move beyond virtual programming, we could see using this in in-person programs, getting to enjoy food together. I know our teen librarian is super excited about utilizing it because the number one rule when it comes to doing any sort of programs or activities for teens is to bring food. So I think she wants to bring it to every teen program that she has in the future. So lots of opportunities. We're really excited to start playing with it.
What is it?
You have a picture you'd like to show, or?
Oh man, I could certainly email a picture as I am.
I think I can do that. You just keep talking, and let me look for that picture real quick.
Sure thing. So it's to describe it further, it's a mobile kitchen cart that's really heavy duty, so it'll last for quite some time. It's been branded with our library logo, and then also Otto with a chef hat on the front. So you'll see that in the photo. So it has a sink that we can use with gray water, with clean water. It has a convection oven. It has fancy burners, induction cooktop, refrigerator. It even has on it a stand for a TV. So if we want to do some filming, we've got a camera hooked up there. And then if we have a larger group, they'd be able to see directly what the cook is doing. So it's, very professional.
One more question. Where is it stored?
We're trying to figure that out, Martha. Our library looks really different these days.
Wow.
Currently, it's in the community room, but we'd love to eventually have it perhaps downstairs in the hollow.
You also that?
How do you move it?
It's on wheels. It's if you look at the bottom of that crate, you'll see the wheels it's on. I'm going to share another picture too of it with you.
It fits in the elevator to go downstairs stuff?
Just barely, yes. And you can see that silver on the top. Those are actually tables that you can take off easily and set up so you have some seating nearby.
Wow.
So we could foresee too using this, outside, maybe even taking it to schools. There's lots of opportunities we think to use it and bring people together and collaborate.
So it has a refrigerator. It has, we also have the ability to, what we really like this cart, it has a pole that you won't see on it because it's not mounted yet. That allows us to put a video camera and also a monitor so people can see out in the audience and also can shoot from the top what people are doing. So if any of you have watched cooking shows, you often see that overhead shot of a chef working, and this will allow us to do that as well, which is one of the great benefits. So we can do virtual lessons with it and try to capture the full essence of what that's like. So it's really the company that builds these for fire crews and police crews, emergency services. So they're really, really, really heavy duty, and they're built to be moved and to last. So we're really excited about this opportunity to bring our community kitchen to our community. And so you'll be looking for some programming online soon.
Awesome. Okay, how about reopening library phase 1 now?
Sure. So we started Monday, opening the library up to allow people to come in without appointments to pick up their library materials that they put on hold, also for quick reference questions and circulation questions. And our first day, which was Monday, we had quite the turnout. We had a steady flow. We anticipated we might have big lines. We had lots of people through, but we were able to accommodate them in a timely manner. So Rick and I and Sarah and Mel and our staff spent 2 weeks getting this ready to happen. There were a lot of reasons for that, but mostly was make sure we had all of our P's and Q's in order. We have OSHA regulations, which for our employees, we need to make sure we're abiding by, and also our OHA and regulations set forward by our governor. So that helps our patrons be safe as well. So, and then we had to change people's schedules and honor our union contracts. So we were excited to open. We found that 99.9% of everyone was super excited to be there. And that 0.1% were just okay with being there. Nobody hated being there. How's that sound? There were a lot more exuberance than there was anything else, which is fantastic. And we've seen all the way from tears of joys to, lots of yelling and excitement that they're actually in, and they're just so excited to be able to come in the library, even if it's just to pick up their holds. We started slow on purpose. We wanted to match what was happening in Wilsonville and what was happening in Lake Oswego. Lake Oswego opened their doors the same day to do the same thing. And we're trying to coordinate as best we can with our other libraries in the county to be providing services that are similar, but also that are safe for our layout, for how we use our library, as each library is different from a floor plan and also from the folks that they serve. And so I think it's gone really well. We want to build. I didn't want to open up and have a lot of things that we were trying to accomplish and then have to dial back. I'd rather be adding systematically new things that we can do. And so we're excited for that. We want people to be happy to be back in the library, but not necessarily fully fulfilled, because we hope that full fulfillment happens when we're back all the way, as we all hope to be when COVID is sunsetted. So it's exciting. Our very first people through the doors was a young family who had moved during COVID. They'd never been into our library before. So they were waiting and excited to come into our building. And it's been really rewarding to find new folks that have come into our library that have joined us since COVID started, since we closed a year ago in March. That have never been in our library, and to see their excitement and to be able to come in and get their materials and get library cards and start experiencing it in some small ways. So we hope to see all of you there picking up your holds at some point.
I will say I came in on Monday and it was excellent. There was no wait at all. And we walked right through. It was really, really, really fun. Great,
Emily. That's wonderful. Good. So we have a person here that can verify what we're saying. So that's fantastic. So we're continuing to try to do that. I think our next thing we'll do is next week we'll add wireless or at-home printing, so you can print. For a lot of people don't have printers anymore, and so you'll be able to send your print jobs to the library and then come pick them up, and we won't be charging for that. So if you want to print out Ulysses, we'll probably have to figure out some other plan. But if you're just wanting to print out a few pages here and there, a handful, we'll be happy to help you out in that area. And then, eventually as things get better, we'll hopefully be open up for browsing and some other things. I think to be honest with you, it's a long way before we're going to have, I use the term sitting down in the library. I don't think we'll be sitting down in the library as far as patron goes for a while, which means in-house programming, study carols and studying. The requirements for us to keep that safe from cleanliness standpoint, and also just from a lot of the other optics and that need to happen, I think we're still a ways off, but I think we can see it in the horizon for sure. And so I think, first we'll start with that, and then we're also going to try to, when we open up for browsing at some point in the future, we will also probably reopen the bookstore for people to be able to acquire books. We're probably going to go cashless for a while, as long as we possibly can. It just makes it easier from a safety standpoint because we'll be able to, when we get to that point, be able to use your credit cards, and you'll be able to just swipe them yourselves, and you won't be transferring from one person to another. So exciting things. Logistics is, I feel like I'm ready for a job at FedEx with logistics. You know how they do all those things. It feels like that's what we do quite a bit of. So it's exciting though, because I think that overall is to see the excitement in everyone's eyes to come back into the library, just to experience the picking up holds, which you can tell it's been a year, right? Because that's really exciting. So we're happy to provide that excitement, and hopefully as we familiarize ourselves with this new adaptation, we'll be able to add things to it and be able to increase our ability to provide more of those services that everyone's become accustomed to having for their library. We're open 5 days a week for this now, from 11 to 4. I'm sorry, 6 days a week, 11 to 4, 5 days of those weeks. And on Saturday, this will be our first Saturday open, we'll be open from 10 to 2. We're hoping the Saturday open hours will help for folks that maybe work later or can't get to the library during that regular time. I think we will probably, based on some of the requirements that and some of the requests that are being asked for by our state and local governments and our CDC, we'll probably stay at that 5-day mark for a while, and maybe all the way until we're out of COVID, where we add the 6th day. They want us to restrict those hours all the way through the lowest form of risk. So I think that's what we'll probably end up doing. And we'll just see where those work out. And we've been counting every hour how many people come in. We've been also seeing how many books and items that we're checking out to each patron. So we're trying to figure out those sweet spots where we're seeing the most activity. And if we can add to those things and make them better, we will as well. So we're just gathering data and trying to be as helpful as possible. And like I said, everyone has been so happy. And overall, it's just been wonderful to see how well the city has enjoyed the library and is enjoying the library now. We've not been met with any problems. Martha.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Are you guys able to get the vaccine, or have any of your employees, any of the staff at the library, are you guys?
That's a good question. Our employees have, some of them have, some of them got them for various reasons that they were able to acquire them based on their own personal situations. We were able to, just as a side note, my wife, who's, as many of you know, is the associate principal over at Oregon City, she had to try to get all of her folks vaccinated. So she created this wonderful vaccination sheet on how you find a vaccine in Oregon and all the ways you go about doing it. And so we were able to share that with our staff as they become eligible. We have folks that are eligible right now, and all the ones that have been eligible from an age perspective have been able to either are getting vaccinated or have been at least got their first vaccination, or some of them, I think one of them's gotten the Johnson & Johnson, so they've already been vaccinated, and we're hearing more and more doing that. Our goal was to wait until we had everybody vaccinated before we opened the doors. Unfortunately, that just was not going to be a reality for us, and I felt this was the next best, safest thing we could do. And so if you have a chance to come in the library, you'll see that each of our staff is behind a sneeze guard. It's not bulletproof, but it's sneeze proof. And we have it really well protected. You come in, you have to use hand sanitizer. We ask you kindly to do that. And everyone has. One person put it on as aftershave as a joke, but everyone else was okay and used it as it was appropriately meant to be used. Everyone has come in with a mask, but we do offer masks for the face if anybody wants to come in without one, but we've not, everyone's well trained now. It's been a year, and West Linn folks are usually, they're really good about that kind of thing. So we haven't had that be an issue at all. So, we went through some training, scenario-based training last Friday, where we closed the library, and we talked about all these things. And of course, people were nervous and anticipating and excited to see people, but also nervous for this new interaction. And I have to say that, our staff has been really good about helping to create those boundaries, those 6-foot distancing in a kind way. And people are excited, and, they're always even telling me, Doug, you're a little close. I'm like, okay, I'm backing away. So it's just, but it's all done in a nice way and in an appropriate way. And so I think that literally it's the safest we could do for our next step. And I felt being in the moderate and having other libraries around us being open, it was important that if we were going to control how we were going to proceed, it was important that we made these decisions in consultation with the city and the state in this manner. I didn't want it to be dictated to us and then have to open up more things than maybe we would have felt a little less comfortable in doing right off the bat. So it's slow and steady. Our goal is to just continue to make sure that this is safe. And as it becomes more aware that we can do more things, we feel like we have the personnel and we have the right requirements, we'll start to open. I didn't want to close things down after opening up and making an overcommitment and say, oh, well, we can't really do all this now, so we're going to bring it down. I'd rather be able to add things than subtract things. So that was kind of the methodology and thought process going into it.
Okay, foundation update. Do we have a foundation update? We didn't have a meeting last time, did we? It was canceled.
There was supposed to be a meeting last week, but I may have been the person that created the cancellation. We were scrambling because we were just getting everything set up that day for our next day's training. So I asked if we didn't have to attend that meeting, and that may have collapsed the house of cards. But anyway, I think everything's going well. We will be talking to the foundation about the reopening of the bookstore sometime in the coming months, and also some of getting some folks in and volunteers and how that's going to work from a safety perspective and getting things sorted and inventory and those kind of things. So I think the group's excited to progress in these ways and do things. So but I think right now they don't have a particular project they're working on at this moment in regards to the library, just the overall things that they're normally doing.
Okay, any board comments? No board comments? Would someone make a motion to adjourn?
Well, we got a hand up over here.
I'm
Didn't see
not,
that.
I'll just make a comment as the council liaison, I'm a member of the board, but I just wanted to share with board members that the council is going to have our goal setting session coming up in a couple weeks. And if anybody has any suggestions or comments related to the library or anything else for the goals going forward for the year, those would be appreciated. You can share them with me via email or testify at the goal setting. But I think we're going to be talking about like each group and each advisory group and what